Although you can't see it on him, it is a disability. There is an inner disability that Kevin has. And even though he isn't physically handicapped, he still has a developmental problem that's as real as any other physically disabled child. Like 2 million other children in this country, Kevin has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, a developmental disorder that severely affects his ability to pay attention, to control his behavior, and to manage his activity level. ADHD is a chronic condition that, if left untreated, can lead to a series of lifelong problems. Although Kevin struggles with his ADHD every day, there are many things that can be done to help him manage his disorder, and at the same time provide a better quality of life for him and his family. Hello, I'm Dr. Russell Barkley, and I'm the Director of Psychology and Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center in Worcester, Massachusetts. Ever since attention deficit hyperactivity disorder was first described, people have proposed a variety of treatments in order to help these individuals cope with their symptoms. A number of these continue to be very popular, and yet they have almost no scientific support. These are such things as dietary management, vitamin therapy, sensory integration training, which are exercises that occupational therapists might recommend to help someone who has motor clumsiness, and chiropractic treatment, to name just a few. Luckily, there are a variety of other treatments that have been found to produce some benefits for helping ADHD individuals cope with their symptoms, particularly when these treatments are used in conjunction with each other. In this program, we will explore some of these treatments and demonstrate the effects that they can have on managing ADHD behavior.
Basically, this is an image of the human living brain.
In talking about treatments for ADHD, it is important to first understand that no one has as yet found a cure. ADHD is caused by a neurological defect in the areas of the brain that control attention span, motivation, and impulsivity. Research is showing that the brain deficiency related to ADHD is probably a genetically caused condition.
I would like you to put your work box on top of your reading book and put your book on top of your name tag. Amy,
while many children are inattentive, impulsive, and overactive at times, those with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder exhibit these behaviors in a persistent and pervasive way that is developmentally inappropriate for the person's age.
Yes. What do you need to do? All right, look in your box. What do you need from your box? No, what do you need to put your name on your paper? Jennifer, you...
In addition to inattention, impulsivity, and high activity level, people with ADHD also have less ability to follow instructions or adhere to rules.
Yes, what? And what do you
They are usually more concerned with what is happening at the moment and less about long-term goals.
Yes, Kevin, I would be more than happy to get you a pencil. Would you ask politely like that?
It is understandable, then, that not knowing how to behave, how to plan, or how to achieve goals that are distant can make life quite difficult.
Okay, let's see who has the... Oh, Andrew.
But like other chronic conditions, ADHD can be managed through lifestyle changes, counseling, and medical interventions.
Whose paper does it...
Now, Kevin, you need to take a time out.
But even when treatments are successful, it is critical to remember that people with ADHD will always have their disability. And there will be many instances when their symptoms may not be as easily managed as other times.
Could you call on someone who has their hand up, please?
The most important treatment that can be provided to families of ADHD children is the counseling and education of their parents about the nature of this disorder. Mary, I asked you to come back in today so that we would have a chance to go back over how things have been going with Kevin. Mary is the mother of Kevin, a 6-year-old boy who has ADHD. Can you kind of give me a brief summary of how Kevin's doing right now at home?
He's doing pretty well at home, as long as he's kept busy for most of the day. We have to structure the day for him pretty much.
This type of
when
counseling
he has
has
free-
several important ingredients. First, it is essential that the professional providing the counseling review with the family the nature of the disorder, its primary symptoms, its developmental course and outcome, its causes, and the range of available treatment options that exist for helping the child and family cope with this handicapping condition. Second, the family must come to understand that ADHD is a developmental disability, that it is a handicap that affects the child's life in many ways. I find that it helps to remind yourself that I'm raising a disabled child, and even though I don't see the disability, it's there. It's in the way he acts. When you phrase it that way, you're less likely to get angry and exasperated and more likely to have a little more compassion for somebody who has a disability.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he won't be frustrating to you, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't discipline him or that you shouldn't have rules that he has to follow. You should do all of those things. It just means that in your heart you should understand that he really does struggle against this disability that he has.
I've learned a lot more about it, but it's still discouraging as a parent to have a child with ADHD because it's not something he's going to outgrow. And to look forward to the teenage years unless we get more control of him or he gets more control of himself, I see some troubled years ahead with Kevin.
Because it is a handicap, it is unlikely to go away over time. Therefore, the third ingredient is to help families understand that more than changing the child, they must come to change their expectations about what they expect that child to do.
Oh, come on. Not on me.
Melissa is a 12-year-old who has ADHD. While she loves to play with her dog for hours on end, she loses interest in her schoolwork in minutes.
Its body has a head with technical feelers, eyes, a mouth, and tiny teeth.
You want to write down a little bit of that information? You got to start somewhere. You got to write what it's called that you're doing.
After years of struggling, her mother has learned to accept the limits that ADHD has placed on Melissa.
You should be able to expect that she can follow through a little more easily, and she can't. I don't really look at too far past getting through high school because I don't want to disappoint myself in saying I want this or I want, I don't know what she's going to be like.
Once this change in expectations occurs, it is important for the family to learn to modify the environment around the child in order to help the child be more successful. This might include something simple such as changing where the child performs his homework, also changing where the child at school might sit in the classroom. But the key element here is to understand that we modify the environment around the handicapped individual rather than attempting to modify the individual themselves. As part of this learning to modify the environment and not the child, it is critical that the family learn to accept the child for his strengths and weaknesses, as opposed to continuing to try to get the child to behave like someone he or she is not.
She's a well-rounded child now. She's done quite well socially compared to a few years ago. She didn't have, any friends, and now she has a lot of friends, so that's, that's one plus. I think in that respect she'll do good because she can interact well with other people, but scholastically, I don't know. I'm just going to have to wait until those years come.
Finally, it is crucial that families concentrate on supporting and building the self-esteem of the individual with ADHD. This is important because the person with ADHD is going to be receiving a lot of criticism, censure, punishment, and rejection from other individuals in society who do not fully understand this disorder. Therefore, parents and teachers must look for things that the ADHD individual does well, and to help that child concentrate on those activities, perhaps more than we do with normal children, in order to bolster their self-esteem.
Dinner's ready.
Kevin has been receiving treatment for several months. This has included behavior management techniques for him and training and counseling for his parents.
I think he's more aware of his behavior now. He's more aware when he's doing something wrong or when he's doing something right. The most important thing is to praise Kevin a lot. He responds well to praise, as all children do, but he needs more praise than most. He could use a a pleasant comment every 5 minutes to keep him going.
This song to temptation with the newest video. Amen.
Amen. Nice job.
Another effective intervention for helping families cope with and raise an individual with ADHD is parent training in behavior modification and child management techniques.
We've got some new material to go over tonight, but one of the things I'd like to do, per usual, is to go over the material that we've covered so far.
This is a parent training session run by a colleague, Dr. Arthur Anastopoulos.
Let me go ahead and get started and talk about the existing home token systems. If I remember correctly, both of you have set them up. They were working fairly well with the reward component, and the penalty component had gone fairly smoothly also. Is that still the case?
It's a good reward system for her, and she does look forward to getting the rewards for everything that she does. I will be talking to her teacher soon and trying to tie this into the school behavior.
Okay.
We're much more concerned with the school behavior than the home behavior.
Okay.
And hopefully she'll start realizing that if she acts well in school and follows the rules, that she'll be happier at home and be receiving the tokens at home and have more privileges at home also.
Okay.
How much do I have?
The token system of reward and punishment is a behavior modification technique that is very useful in managing the daily behavior of ADHD children.
Are you staying with me right now?
Yes.
Then I'll give you a poker chip. Put it in your
This
pocket.
stems from the notion that ADHD involves a deficit in effort, inhibition, and motivation.
That's right.
Because of this, ADHD children require more immediate feedback or consequences for their behavior than do other children.
We also use a token system with Kevin, where he's rewarded with tokens for good behavior, and he's fined. We withdraw the tokens for bad behavior, and he's able to turn in his tokens for rewards, like riding his bike or TV time, going to a restaurant. Kevin, you want a poker chip?
Yes.
You have to do what you're told.
In the token system, simple items like poker chips are used to provide the feedback. But feedback can also be given using affection or verbal rewards. Regardless of the nature of the feedback, to be effective, it must be clear, specific, and occur as close to the behavior that is the target of change as circumstances permit. And because ADHD children have a reduced sensitivity to rewards, sometimes larger and more valuable incentives may have to be used to develop and maintain positive behaviors.
In the mall, you'll get to go to the pet shop and pet the puppies and see the kittens.
Last week we talked about timeout strategies. You folks didn't have quite as much need for that, but there were some things that your son was doing, that those don't behaviors that we talked about, the more serious rule violations that timeout is well suited to address. So,
along with establishing a system for rewarding good behavior, parents of ADHD children also need to learn an effective system of punishment.
And then what I've done, maybe the first time you do it, chips are taken. The second time I take chips plus timeout. The third time, depending on the situation, I take the chips, timeout, and you'll go to bed a half hour early. Hoping that each time it gets more severe, I won't, eventually after the first time, that will be it.
In the timeout system, when a child displays an inappropriate behavior, he or she is immediately placed in a chair in an isolated location in the home. The child should remain there for a brief period of time, but must become quiet and agree not to perform that behavior again before being released from the chair. While timeout techniques work well in the home, they are impractical in public places. When an ADHD child begins to act up in public, parents can easily become frustrated and unable to handle such problems. This is often combined with a sense of humiliation when the child behaves poorly in front of strangers.
one of the most common problems that parents commit when they go into public situations is that they walk into them with their difficult kids without a game plan. You think there's a game plan, but that's where we're wrong. Kids aren't really sure about what the game plan is. Oh yeah, generally they know they're supposed to behave, but that's too vague, too nonspecific. Yeah, they know they might get into trouble if they misbehave, but again, that's too vague, too nonspecific. So one of the first things that you do in order to get better control over behavior out in public is to go into the situation with a plan of action.
A plan of action consists of 4 simple steps. Before entering any public place, first, stop at the door. Second, review 2 or 3 rules that the child often has trouble following. Rules like stand close, don't touch, and don't beg. Then ask the child to repeat these rules back. Third, review with the child what rewards they may be able to earn if they obey the rules and behave well. And fourth, review the consequences if the child doesn't follow these rules, the loss of points or poker chips or a privilege later in the day. Once these 4 steps have been followed, the parent immediately begins to give the child frequent feedback and occasional rewards or tokens for good behavior.
If you earn enough poker chips, we'll go to a restaurant.
Here?
No, we'll go to a restaurant with Daddy.
No.
It is also important to keep the right perspective on the behavior problems that may arise. Remember, this is a child with a handicap. While the child cannot always help behaving in the ways that ADHD children do, the parent can. In addition to these, there are other treatments that have been shown to be of some benefit to individuals with ADHD. These include social skills training, individual therapy, family therapy, and in some cases, residential treatment. It is also helpful to refer parents to parent support organizations. Sandy Thomas is the president of CHADD, Children with ADD, a national organization with many local chapters.
I guess because these kids come into the world with kind of unique personalities, and parents don't always understand what the underlying difference is, the more information we have, the better we know how to help them. And so unless we know precisely what is causing either the misbehavior or the inability to cope or to function, we can't really treat it effectively, either through strategies at home or helping the teachers understand what to do at school. So it's really information sharing and then providing what the child needs based on what the underlying problem is.
In addition to being the national president of a parent support organization and a nurse, Sandy is also the parent of a young boy severely affected by ADHD.
He was bright, he was creative and lively, but he just couldn't focus. He couldn't finish a task. He went from one thing to the other and talked continually without really saying anything, but just a constant repetition of words and movements and motions. We went to a psychologist who was very helpful, and eventually we got a diagnosis of ADHD as part of as underlying difficulties. But it's been very alienating and very depressing. There have been times when it's just difficult to feel a part of society because you have this child you love and you want to do the best for, but you're not invited anywhere as a family. And that's really, it hurts because you know that you're not a bad parent and the child's not a bad kid. He just can't seem to fit in. Birthday parties where these other kids get invited to, these children don't often because other parents don't know how to cope with their behaviors and their interactions. So it can be very depressing. And this is what I hear from a lot of parents around the country, the same kind of experience. Thankfully for us, we got information. We learned more about ADD, what it is, what it isn't, and how to help them. I mean, there's a wide variety of abilities in these children. They're often divergent thinkers, they're often creative. They're just neat kids, but they have trouble pulling it all together. And I think our goal as parents is to work with others who work with our children to get the best we can out of our kids.
Besides the education and training of parents in order to help them raise their ADHD children or teenagers, another effective therapy often used with ADHD children is medication. There are 3 types of medication which have proven effective for ADHD. The first and most common is the stimulant drugs. The second is antidepressants, and a third more recent drug known as clonidine, which is an antihypertensive drug usually used to treat high blood pressure, have all been found to be useful in helping individuals with ADHD. Unfortunately, although there have been more than 700 controlled studies of the use of stimulants proving their effectiveness for ADHD, there has been a tremendous controversy in the United States about whether these drugs should be used with ADHD children and whether they are really effective. Stimulant medications have been researched far more than any other treatment for any child psychiatric disorder. The results overwhelmingly indicate that these medications are quite effective for the management of ADHD symptoms in most children over the age of 5 years. In fact, the success of these medications has led to widespread acceptance. Between 1 and 2.6% of school-age children are treated with stimulants for ADHD symptoms. The most commonly prescribed stimulants are Ritalin, Dexedrine, and Cylert. These are rapid-acting, producing effects within 30 to 45 minutes and lasting for 2 to 4 hours. They are taken 2 or 3 times per day. Although once used only for school, they are now taken throughout the week, particularly for the more severely affected children. These drugs are highly effective in managing ADHD symptoms. However, like any medication, they too have their side effects. The most frequently occurring side effects of the stimulants are mild insomnia and appetite reduction. Temporary growth suppression may accompany stimulant treatment, but can be controlled by proper nutrition. A few children become irritable as the medication wears off. A small percentage may complain of stomach aches and headaches, but these tend to dissipate within a few weeks. In a very small number of children, motor or vocal tics may occur. A lower dose may eliminate this problem. If the tics continue, treatment with stimulants should be stopped. Although the stimulant drugs are very useful in helping most ADHD children, some children may not respond to the stimulant drugs at all, or may have adverse reactions. There is another class of drugs that has recently been found to be helpful in treating ADHD. These drugs are known as antidepressants. Imipramine and desipramine have been useful in the short-term treatment of ADHD children in cases where stimulants cannot be tolerated or where mood problems accompany the disorder. These medications are longer acting than the stimulants, and they are taken 2 times a day. Low doses of these drugs mimic stimulants in improving attention and impulsivity. Elevation in mood may also occur, especially in those children where depression or anxiety already exist. Treatment effects may diminish over time, meaning that these drugs cannot be used as long-term therapy. The most common side effects are drowsiness during the first few days of treatment, dry mouth, constipation, and flushing. Less likely, yet more important, are the potential cardiac effects, such as tachycardia, an abnormally fast heartbeat, or arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat. A small number of children may have problems focusing their eyes, while others may develop a skin rash. These reactions are not permanent and disappear when treatment with these drugs is withdrawn. Within the past few years, scientists have also learned that there is a third class of drugs that might be of some benefit to ADHD children, particularly those who are having trouble with controlling aggressive or explosive outbursts. This drug is known as clonidine and is a type of antihypertensive often used to treat blood pressure, but this drug also has certain behavior-modifying properties. Clonidine produces improvements in hyperactive and impulsive behavior while decreasing aggressive behavior and outbursts. These improvements are not as dramatic as those seen with the stimulants, particularly in attention and work productivity, so stimulants still remain the drug of choice for many ADHD children. The behavioral effects produced by the medications are dramatic and highly noticeable, especially in settings that encourage ADHD behaviors. For example, this boy was videotaped while being evaluated for ADHD using a technique known as the restricted academic test. The idea is to ask the child to complete an uninteresting task such as simple math problems in a setting with 1 or 2 possible distractors, like a telephone or a window. Typically, an ADHD child, unable to concentrate, will find these distractions irresistible and will go off task within a few minutes. However, within a half hour of taking stimulant medication, the same child is now able to concentrate well enough to complete the assignment despite the presence of the more attractive alternatives. Disruptive behaviors also diminish with medication. As a result, ADHD children become more compliant and cooperative. But placing a child on any medication is never an easy decision. The following concerns should be addressed when considering medical treatment. 1. the age of the child. 2, the severity of symptoms. 3, the risk to the child of accidents or misuse. 4, the success of other treatments. 5, a history of tics or Tourette's syndrome. 6, a normal level of anxiety. And 7, the likelihood that the parents will use the medication as prescribed. All of these drugs have been shown to be useful in the day-to-day management of ADHD symptoms. Unfortunately, most follow-up studies have shown that just using medication by itself, particularly during the childhood years, does not seem to change the course or the outcome of this disorder at all. Fortunately, more recent studies by Dr. James Satterfield in California have shown that combining medication with the other treatments that I have mentioned can alter the course of this disorder and produce significant favorable outcomes, provided that medication is combined with other treatments and that these treatments are used into the adolescent years of the person with ADHD. Now, even if medications were not found to change some of the outcomes of ADHD, Marcel Kinsborn has recently shown that drugs may help the quality of life of the child while he is growing up. For instance, drugs may reduce the amount of punishment that the child receives, may help the child receive better grades in school and get more work accomplished, and may help the child with ADHD to have more friends and to participate in more clubs and organizations than he might otherwise be able to do if his ADHD symptoms were not controlled by medication. Over 90% of children and teenagers with ADHD will have difficulties in school. These include problems with completing assignments during the day, with taking tests, and with completing homework. In addition, the symptoms of ADHD will also cause significant behavior problems in the classroom.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
This is a very special kindergarten made up completely of ADHD children. The class is part of a long-term study of the disorder, and in many ways it is a laboratory where educational and behavioral management theories can be practiced and observed.
What we had to do was structure the classroom in such a way that the children are going to want to learn, want to be productive, want to get along. And
Cheryl Crosswaite is the teacher trainer and the liaison for the program.
So the first thing that you have to have is a behavior modification system in place, and it needs to be simple. I told one of the teachers it's quick and dirty methods for behavior modification.
Jennifer, you need to hold that with 2 hands, please. Thank you.
You've got to have something that the teacher can easily use and not interrupt her pace and her teaching. So what we've put up is a color chart where each child's name is on the board, and we have a little strip of color next to each child's name.
Amy, thank you. The letter is P. What sound does P make? Of course, we all should know P. Pizza is our favorite thing.
The chart is simple. Every child starts the day with a series of red markers. If a child behaves mildly inappropriate, one of the reds is changed to yellow. If the behavior is highly inappropriate, it is changed to blue. The key motivator is that the colors and the number of spots are tied into previously known rewards. For example, a child who behaves well enough to keep all the markers red earns the right to use the most interesting toys or games during activity time. A child who has 1 or more yellow markers is allowed to play with less interesting but still enjoyable materials. And a child with 1 or more blue markers is limited to simpler activities such as drawing with crayons and paper. The technique works for 2 reasons. First, it is simple enough for the teachers to use and for the children to understand. And second, it is tied into specific rewards for following or breaking the rules.
They have attentional problems. They aren't going to remember a huge list of rules, so we have 3 basic rules. You have to be nice to the other people in the class, get along with other people. You have to follow directions that the teacher or any adult gives you, and you have to do your best. If you break one of those rules, you have a yellow. If you follow the rules, you stay red. Of course, if you have an aggression or destruction, you get blue. But the rules are very simple. The kids know what they are, and every half an hour we'll go over the chart, and the kids will say, I earned red, and we'll ask them, why did you earn red? And they can repeat back, I was friendly to others, I followed the rules, I did my best work. And so the kids know what the rules are. It's very clear for them. If they earn a yellow, we'll ask them, what do you need to do next time to get a red? So that the emphasis is always on the positive behavior, what they need to do, not what did you do wrong to get this yellow, or what did you do wrong to get a blue, but what can you do next time so you can get a red?
Behavior modification techniques also involve the home.
And Andy Morrow has 5 big deals for yesterday.
Yay, Andrew.
Parents are apprised of their children's behavior on a daily basis by means of a report card. Conversely, the parents report back to the teachers the targeted behaviors observed at home.
Yay, Kevin.
We have a chart up on the wall, it's a pizza, and the kids put their big deal stickers up on the pizza, and after they get 400 or something like that, then the group gets a party. And it might be a pizza party, it might be nachos, something that the whole group earns.
Yay.
If you help your mom around the house, if you do what you're told the first time, you can get a big deal point. That way, At Home is involved with giving rewards, and we're involved with giving rewards for using pro-social skills.
Oh, look at all those big deals. We'll have pizza in no time.
Yes.
ADHD behavior management techniques in the classroom, as in the home, rely on frequency and immediacy.
We also have a beeper tape that goes off every 10 minutes. And there's a reason for this. We want them to have their self-esteem built up. And that's the teacher's cue to praise the positive behaviors, to go around and give specific feedback as to what the children are doing right.
You're doing a good job keeping the bottom on the chair.
Staying by a seat. John and Andrew, you need to write that you weren't following directions.
Teachers also need to have a hierarchy of mild punishments which they consistently implement for rule infractions.
One other system that we have is a task system where if the children break a rule, they have to go and write. And they write their numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 3 times. What this does is it stops cycling behavior, because a lot of times a child will misbehave and then we'll call them on it, and then they'll start cycling. It's like, well, we caught you on this, and then they'll show another negative behavior, and we'll have to consequate that, and then another negative behavior, because they're getting the negative attention. And for these children, any kind of attention is good. They just as soon have negative, some of them, because it's what they're used to. What this task does is it stops the behavior. They have to go and write, settle down, and then come back to class.
Thank you for sharing that with me, Kevin.
In addition to behavior modification, there are a number of useful techniques that teachers can apply when dealing with ADHD children. These include reducing the length of the assigned work, where possible, to the minimum needed to acquire the skill being taught. Teachers should concern themselves less with accuracy than with the quantity of work completed. Alter the style of instruction so that it is more lively, entertaining, and flexible. Avoid rewarding children for the speed of their answers. Instead, emphasize the problem-solving process. Externalize major sets of rules for classroom behavior. For example, posting of a sign that is readily visible at the front of the room. And anticipate problems by reviewing expectations before moving on to the next activity. It is critical to remember that this is a specialized kindergarten, one designed to meet the specific needs of attention deficit children. Kevin and his classmates have made tremendous strides in managing their behaviors while mastering the curriculum. But next year, they will all likely enter first grade in a more traditional setting, and that will provide an even greater challenge.
When you have these children in school and you've got 30 children in the room and a lot of distractors with that many children, they can't sit still and pay attention and sustain attention and learn from what's going on around them. It's like too much feedback, too much stimulus for them. And they sit there in the room and kind of get lost. If they're just having intentional problems, they can space off and not learn anything the whole year. If they have behavior problems, they'll end up in the office because their behaviors are interfering with the other children's learning, and it seems reasonable to the teacher to put them in the office so that the other children can learn. And so either way, they end up not learning. Just because they're in the special program for kindergarten isn't going to fix the attention deficit problem. That will follow them through all of their school years. What we're hoping to do with a program like this is to give the child confidence that he can do well in kindergarten, confidence that since he did well in kindergarten, he can also do well in first grade. Positive feelings toward teachers and toward the educational process. And if you have that, they can be successful. If you don't, you'll lose them.
ADHD children are now eligible for special education services should their symptoms significantly interfere with their school performance. Parents are encouraged to contact their local school district Office of Special Education or ADHD Parent Support Group for more details on their child's rights under both Public Law 94-142, the Education of the Handicapped Act, and Section 504 of the Disabilities Rights Act. ADHD is a developmental handicapping condition that is relatively chronic and affects the adult outcome of most individuals diagnosed with this disorder. Although it has biological causes, there are a number of treatments that, if combined, can help these individuals to lead more successful, happy, and productive lives.